All right. This should be the start of the end of November live stream. Let me know when you guys can see and hear me and if it is going well. Feel free to say so in the after video chat thread on the Moore's Laws Discord if you're a patron, but then also obviously in the live stream chat as well. All right, everyone is saying they can hear me all right. So I think we are good to get started. All right. Here we are. Welcome to the end of November live stream or loose ends. This is called a loose ends because this is where I tie up any loose ends from the previous month's news cycle, like things that I still have to say about it, any questions you might have for me about anything that's happened. And of course, I also take live questions. So remember, if you want to submit a question and you weren't a patron that submitted it ahead of time, which I will get to those as well, be sure to send a tipped question in the live chat. It'll make it more easy for me, or it'll make your question stand out compared to the constant stream of all of the other ones. Although I will answer some of those as well if I have time. But like I usually do at the beginning of a live stream, I open up with some leaks, and I've actually got some very fun leaks for you today. So let's not waste any more time here, huh? Let's get right into this. And get to the PlayStation leaks. And then I actually have leaks about RDNA4 pricing next year. And also what my contacts tell me you all should be thinking when you hear about Micron killing Crucial. Because I do believe there's been some mischaracterization of like what it means for the industry. Not to say that things are going great with RAM prices, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's first get to the PlayStation stuff. All right. So let me say that I've been speaking with a few developers over the past week, and they have given me access to some emails they've received from Sony and also some documentation. I won't say where, but like documentation that devs have access to help them develop their games. Now, I want to be clear about this information before I show you the quotes on screen. I considered just recreating the emails or recreating the documents I saw, obviously not literally showing them because we've seen what Sony does when I do stuff like that. But I thought even that could be risky. And also, it would be a much more drawn out way to show you the information. So, what I did is I spoke with a couple developers and I summarized how they would summarize the information in the documents and emails that they told me about and that I also saw myself. And then I sent the quote to them to get approval. I say all this to you because it's not like I was just told some things from contacts in game development. I also literally did see some of these emails and documents myself. But, I didn't want to like show those, and I thought it would still be better to show this as a quote format. But it's not like I'm making this up as a quote. Anytime I show you those quotes on screen, it's not just me summarizing what a dev said, right? It's I talk to them, I write down what they said, I put that into a quote, and then I send them the slide. I've said the slides you're about to see, I sent to the developers I spoke with ahead of time and said, is this correct? Is this what you would say? You agree? This is what you told me. So it's not always direct, but it's like approved by the source. And so let's get into it anyways. The first one here is actually about the PS6 handheld. Let me pull this up on screen. Boom. So hopefully you can see that there. I'm sorry it's a little small, but I had to do this in this format. Otherwise, my face, the video feed would block part of the quote. But here, let me go here. So this source said to me, this week we, a game developer, received emails from Sony pushing low power mode hard, almost like they need us to support it directly eventually. They provided tutorials and instructions that outline that number one, they shouldn't just lower frame rates to fit into low power modes requirements. No, instead, they should try to maintain 60 frames per second by lowering resolutions. Also, Razer CPU, and I was told and saw some stuff about it actually. This is a CPU utility for PS5 game development that devs have access to. This Razer CPU utility, they put out walkthroughs that aim to help devs find bottlenecks so they can reduce CPU usage and even look for ways to reduce how many threads are used by their games. Furthermore, it is becoming glaringly obvious, according to my contacts, that low power mode is a Trojan horse for getting PS6 handheld support ready before its launch. And they being Sony, seemed a bit annoyed at how few devs directly support it so far, right? So let me just speak a bit about this um, before I move on to the next PlayStation leak. I think that what I just showed you there, and the developers I spoke with that agreed with me, is just more and more evidence that low power mode really isn't there to save the environment. It's there to make sure there's a backup compatibility mode for all PS5 games for the PlayStation 6 handheld, right? Why else? Three reasons why from that quote, right? Why else would they be telling devs? Because I've seen some devs do this. Don't just take your game and lower it from 60 frames to 30. I've seen some developers like add 30 hertz modes. No, Sony wants you to work on lowering certain settings and especially the resolution. That's for a handheld, guys. I don't know what the resolution will be on the PlayStation 6 handheld, but if I had to guess, it's going to be 1080p or 4K with a ton of upscaling, and meaning really 1080p. And so Sony going to developers and saying, no, we want you to lower the resolution, not the frame rate, tells me that they want this fallback mode to be for a handheld that will run games, below 4K 60, but not like 4K 30, like a lower resolution, still running at 60. Right. The second thing that really, again, proves low power mode is a Trojan horse for the PlayStation 6 handheld. Right. The Razer CPU utility, they also want you to reduce how much energy the CPU is using, and especially look for ways to reduce how many threads are consumed. Guys, the PlayStation 6 handheld has four Zen 6C cores, as I've already leaked, and then it also has two Zen 6 low power cores. But those Zen 6 low power cores are really for the same thing that, like, I believe one or two cores in the PlayStation 5 is used um, to handle background tasks in the operating system. So, right, you remove the two low power cores, you remove 1 to 2 cores from PlayStation 5. That still means the amount of cores the game gets full use of is going from like 6 Zen 2 cores, or 6.5 or 7 at this point, I believe, to 4 Zen 6C cores. Now, overall, 4 Zen 6C cores, I'm told by the people I talked to, is definitely still going to outperform 6 to 7 Zen 2 cores. It's still going to be better, but they want to make sure that the game isn't like insisting on using like 12 threads, because they won't have access to that on the PlayStation 6 handheld. The fact that Sony's going to developers and trying to work with them to optimize how many threads need to be used, again, this is for the PS6 handheld. And finally, the third thing is that they seem annoyed. That is the biggest tell in the stuff I've heard today about this low power mode initiative from Sony on PS5. That is the biggest tell that it's really for the PlayStation 6 handheld. Because if low power mode was just about, hey, the devs that want to put in the effort, you can save the environment a little by adding some 30 hertz mode or adding whatever if you want to. If that's what it was about, Sony wouldn't care as much. They could check a box for their corporation and say this is for the environment. They could say, devs that want to use it will use it, and those that don't won't. But the fact that Sony is annoyed with developers who haven't done this yet, and according to what I am told, is like spamming emails at them, hey, dude, add a low power mode, that means they think they need it. They really, really need it, actually. So, yeah, I think more evidence. Sony is the PlayStation 6 handheld. That low power mode is to set up a backup backwards compatibility mode for it, so that when the PS6 handheld launches, basically all PS5 and, well, PS4 won't be an issue. That'll just run like nothing in backwards compatibility mode because of how much weaker it was. But all PS5 games will run in some form on the handheld without needing another patch right away. And I want to, and one more thing to distinguish here. Does not mean that I'm saying that all PS6 handheld games will run worse than PS5. That's not what I'm saying. Think of PlayStation 5 low power mode for PS6, kind of analogous to like running Bloodborne on a PS5, right? There is this backup backwards compatibility mode, this gear that PS5 can shift into for games that never got a patch, like Bloodborne. And that's why Bloodborne, I mean, it runs better on PS5. There's less frame drops, or no frame drops really, compared to playing it on PS4, but it's still limited to a max of 1080p 30. That's kind of how you should think of PS5 low power mode. It's not what the game should run like on PS6 handheld if they're properly patched, but it's there in case the devs don't bother to, in 2 or 3 years, patch their game and optimize it very well for the handheld. Again, for games that are very well optimized for the handheld, yes, it's kind of like an underclocked PS5, but then they will better be able to utilize the PS6's RDNA5 architecture, the new instructions, and the new architectural benefits to probably squeeze out more performance actually than a PS5 have patched. But not all devs will patch their game in a couple of years from now. Some of those games might even be on like end of life. And Sony wants to have this fallback. You got to have a fallback. You've got to have that. Yep, we wish Bloodborne was patched to utilize the PS5 well, or even or even the PS4 Pro, but it wasn't patched. And so we need to make sure that PS5 has backwards compatibility to Bloodborne, even if it's just limited to 1080p 30. Think about PlayStation 5 low power mode in that way for PS6 handheld. Games that are patched for PS6 handheld will probably run as well as a base PS5 overall, like just because it has access to better PSSR, FSR modes and new features of the architecture. But for the games that never patch themselves to utilize the PS6 handheld to the metal, you need that low power mode to still run at that lower setting in case. So this is more evidence that is exactly what's going on at this point. I think this is open and shut that that's what the low power mode's for. But let me now move on. I'll put actually another timestamp here since I talked about that for so long. I saw a lot of you saying in the chat you want to know about PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution 2. So let me get to that quote as well. All right. So here we are on this one. Okay. So this is another developer that spoke with me this week. This person said, I, a game dev, have a few PSSR updates for you. One, there is an application called PSML Replay that Sony has given us for debugging glitches that pop up from PSSR. So Sony is aware that there are multiple big releases that have PSSR artifacting issues. Think of games like Silent Hill F, people, and they are working on it. In fact, and this was a funny quote, this person told me this, and I followed up. I'm like, really? They said yes. In fact, by now, Sony has more tools for PSSR support than AMD does for FSR3 or FSR4. So that tells me that these glitches with PSSR on PS5 Pro versions of games, that they're about to get a lot less prevalent, and the quality is about to go up a ton next year when PSSR2 comes out. Point number two, something called multi-frame super resolution 2 or MFSR2. And I saw in documentation both of these. Sometimes they would write out the whole thing, multi-frame super resolution 2, or they would write out MFSR2, is now referenced in documents that they have access to. And I saw some of these documents. Now, to be clear, MFSR is what Sony calls PSSR behind the scenes. It's kind of like AMD calling C cores dense cores. A lot of documentation will still say Zen 6 dense instead of Zen 6C. MFSR is what Sony and developers call PSSR behind the scenes. So the fact that there's now documents called MFSR2 tells you that what I leaked earlier this year is holding true. It's not just that PSSR is going to get an update next year. It's going to be PSSR2, a massive overhaul. Now, apparently, continuing with this quote here, MFSR2 uses an updated algorithm that reduces the need for some pieces of input data, decreases the amount of memory used, and shortens GPU processing times while delivering, allegedly, according to Sony, better image quality. And it uses an entirely new API too. It's not some 0.5 upgrade. It's huge. This is going to be like FSR3 to FSR4. And I want to be clear, that is what they are saying behind the scenes. This should be like the quality increase, PSSR1 to PSSR2, like FSR3 to FSR4. It's not just like a checkbox thing. The devs actually have to patch their game and use a new API. It is a complete overhaul of PSSR. Final point here, which I found very interesting. FSR4 and FSR3 continue to be mentioned separately of PSSR. PSSR therefore remains its own path. No, AMD and Sony are not going to get rid of PSSR and use FSR4 from now on PS5 Pro. PSSR, PSSR2, presumably with PlayStation 6 PSSR3, these are going to be things that Sony continues to develop to compete with FSR and DLSS on their own. They don't want to have to rely on AMD. They're happy that AMD is going to add FSR4 support to PS5 Pro next year, and they are. But they want to still have their own thing. They want to match or beat FSR4, I'm told, as well. So I think this is actually very exciting. Let me close this there. Now, overall, what this means is that early next year when PSSR2 launches, it's going to be a massive update to the games that get patched to support it. Now, games will need to get patched. It's not just a checkbox. I'm also not even sure if it will be as simple as like an experimental mode in the systems menu where you can like check force PSSR2. Hopefully that's something you can do, but I'm not entirely sure if even that will work. This is supposed to improve PSSR in every way possible with less artifacts, higher quality, and directly compete with FSR4 and DLSS4. So I think that's a big deal. And I also think, again, part of this is a very big deal that they have new tools to reduce the bugs and glitches in PSSR in general in games. Sony has seen the negative reviews, the negative videos where people are mad at artifacting and problems with PSSR implementation in games. They're taking it very seriously. All right, so that was the PlayStation leak. I guess actually before I move on to the Micron stuff and the AMD GPU price increases, well, no, let's save the ad for later. Let's now move on actually to the the why is this doing that? Come on. No. There we go. Let's now move on to the second big leak that I want to put out there today, and that is I have been told what RDNA4 prices should look like next year. Let me change the color. Dum-ba. Okay, let's see here. All right. So, look, obviously, I have seen the reporting, out there that, uh, what is it? Let me go to here. Did, did, I've seen the reporting myself that AMD is raising, RX 9000 series GPU prices by some set amount per amount of VRAM. Obviously, I've already confirmed in other videos that RDNA4 graphics card prices are going to go up. There's a huge, leak, several leaks about this I put out over the past month. So this isn't new that there's going to be price hikes to graphics cards. First, AMD will be hit hard, and then NVIDIA will be hit hard. We've already also seen recent reports that NVIDIA is going to unbundle RAM with their BOM kits. So undoubtedly, NVIDIA graphics card prices will go up just like AMD as well, but they're going to go up after AMD as well, is what I am told and what I can see out there. But I want to say that this article everyone shared, this isn't, I can't confirm that's exactly how it's going to work. Like they're just going to add $10 to 8 GB cards and $20 to 16. In fact, I kind of heard it's decently worse than that. So let me get to this. I don't have a quote that I'm going to put on screen, but here's what I was told a couple hours before I went live from some of my contacts in retail. Basically, yes, in their systems in the back end, they are starting to see RDNA4 graphics card prices change for what they pay for them before they sell them. Now, this is an important distinction because I think a lot of people don't, and I can tell in the comments, a lot of people still do not get how retail works, right? When it comes to tech retail, let's say that let's say a 5080 is sold for $1,200. And then this is where a lot of people will complain, understandably to some degree, and go, $1,200. Oh, look at all this milking. The 5080 is supposed to be $1,000. Let's not even get into the fact that at this point, NVIDIA says it's a suggested price, not even the price it's supposed to be. It's just a suggested price, like maybe it will cost this much. But if you see a 5080 for $1,200 at a Micro Center, typically what that means is that the retailer bought it from like, I don't know, Asus for like 1,100 maybe at most, pretty much, right? See what I'm saying here? It's not like Micro Center's making 200, 300, $400 on a $1,200 5080. No, they negotiate to buy graphics cards from AIBs in bulk, and they typically make, from what I've seen, and I have seen these documents myself, like 20 to $100, sometimes up to 150 when you get to like $3,000 cards or something. But typically it's like a $400, 5060 that's being price gouged. They're making like $20 on that. And they're maybe making $50 to $100 on a $1,200 5080. And then the AIB themselves is probably making like a 5 to 10% margin. So like if MSI makes a 5080 and it's being sold at Micro Center for 1,200, MSI probably breaks even at 1,000 sold it to Micro Center for 1,100, and then Micro Center makes $100 off of that. And Nvidia's laughing to the bank. They get most of the profit margin, which honestly makes sense. But I just want to be clear about that. It's not like right now they're just like, oh, here's $10 more for VRAM or something. No, they're updating their back end systems, and retailers are starting to see what pricing will switch to in quarter 1. And this is where I, get into exactly what I've heard. I'll even put a new timestamp here for future people. But what I've heard is next year, based on the updated pricing, which apparently a couple months ago, the pricing was a bit below MSRP, meaning like a Best Buy could buy a 9070 XT for, I don't know, $570 and maybe sell it for 600 or 650. That isn't 570 anymore. It's gone up. And in general, you should expect the RX 9070 XTs to drift back above $800, the 9070s to drift back above $700, 9060 XT 16 gigabytes to drift above $400, and 9060 8 gigabytes to drift, honestly, probably towards 350 or more. And so far it doesn't sound as bad as what happened with graphics cards in 2021 and 2022. But the night is still young. I said that to one of my sources when they said, ooh, don't count your chickens before they hatch. But at least right now, it doesn't seem like graphics card prices are going to be as bad as they were then so far. But again, that could change. And it's not that much consolation for how much RAM prices have gone up. But so there it is. So I guess what I'm saying is you should basically expect RDNA4 graphics card prices to go back to where they were at the beginning of 2025, where they were inflated mostly, I believe. Well, there were some higher costs back then as well compared to the summer. But in addition to that, NVIDIA was just so gouging RTX 5000 prices that AIBs could maybe, and AMD could maybe get away with selling it above MSRP. Now they're forced to raise prices basically back to what you saw when RDNA4 launched, simply because RAM prices have gone up. So it is what it is. Again, just to repeat, whatever you remember of 9070 XTs in the beginning of this year, 700 to 800 or something. Yep, that's what that sounds like. Maybe a little more sometimes. 9070 is going back to above like 650, probably around 700 or more. And 9060 XT 16 gigabytes probably drifting a bit above $400. And 9060 XT being, probably like 50 to $80 cheaper than that. So it is what it is. But I thought you guys all deserve to know where graphics card prices are going as of now. And like you were warned, they are going up. So, like I keep saying, do not wait. Buy now. Like now is the time to buy. I don't always say you should buy. I mean, early at the beginning of this year, I said you probably don't want to always wait for the graphics card, but like you can wait for some things. And then around this summer, I said buy right now. Keep buying, keep buying, keep buying. And now I'm here to say, well, you missed the boat when it comes to RAM. You missed the boat when it comes to heat sinks, apparently, as well. And pretty soon you will miss the boat when it comes to graphics cards if you don't act pretty quickly. CPUs, I don't know. I've seen rumors that CPU prices will go up or something. I don't really buy that. I think CPU prices will probably remain the same, if not go down. Could some models go up in price? Yeah, sure, whatever. But I believe the less RAM in the consumer market, the more CPUs that will be looking for a home, and because there's no system to build around them, and therefore will probably actually drop in price. But that's the current forecast there. And when it comes to buying now, I will say a great place to do that is a place I've already mentioned, and it is the sponsor of this month's live stream, Micro Center. Yep, this live stream is sponsored by Micro Center, and right now they are doing a bunch of holiday deals. If you go to the link in the description, you can see their best holiday deals right now as well, which actually on this note, now is really the time to buy a new monitor. I mean, monitor prices are insane. I'm seeing a ton of good, like 240 hertz monitors on Micro Center's website right now, in addition to a bunch of accessories. Like now is really the time to buy accessories, I would say. And you can get really good prices on them at Micro Center. Additionally, they have another link to all Micro Center's rotating deals. I know during the holidays, they tend to update these a lot. So make sure you check that. Go back to this video, a few times during December and check the links again, because they might update them as well. And they also have a link to visit Micro Center news. Otherwise, I don't know really what else there is to say about Micro Center, whether it is times of shortages or not. Micro Center is one of those retailers that has some of the best pricing I've ever seen. And so you should check them out. Again, support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out Micro Center through the links below today. Okay. Now let us move on to another thing. I've actually got quite a lot to talk about here. And yeah, it's something that has kind of gone absolutely insane this week. And it is how people are talking about the and reporting on Micron killing off their crucial consumer business. So look, I'm gonna level with you guys. I actually had a source call me a few days ago, pretty irate about the reporting. Well, I guess it wouldn't have been a few days ago, but no, yeah. Let's say within the past 24 hours, and they could not believe how much the Micron killing Crucial thing was blowing up. So don't kill the messenger. I'm just going to tell you what this person told me, and then I'll get into my thoughts. Number one, Crucial wasn't like G-Skill. They're not making these super overclocked RAM kits or whatever. That means that their consumer business is both less profitable than someone like G-Skill or Kingston, whatever. But also that means that their heart was never really in do it yourself. And they pointed out something that I've seen reported in a few places, but not in enough places. And that's that Micron was clearly preparing to kill off Crucial for a while now. They've been phasing out certain products and warranties for months now. It's been an open secret in retail and DRAM representatives that Micron wants to get out of consumer. And to anyone that says this is crazy, guys, does Samsung have some big consumer RAM business? I mean, you can sometimes find Samsung RAM sticks on Newegg, but that's just because some third party is selling them or something because they bought them up from an OEM. Samsung doesn't do this. SK Hynix doesn't do this. And if Micron doesn't do this, that doesn't stop consumer RAM from being made, right? Here's what's going to fix RAM prices, guys. What's going to fix RAM prices is if OpenAI stops gobbling up everything and there's more capacity. And they're already expanding capacity right now, which I've also seen misreported on. That's very weird out there, saying that they're not going to expand capacity. Samsung's already spending capex expanding their capacity right now. They've already got things underway. They are expanding right now already. They already had plans in motion before the shortage started to do that. So I guess what I'm saying is Micron killing Crucial. Why would they do that? Number one, they were already planning to. I'm just telling you they were. They're already planning to at some point, and this gave them the perfect excuse. Number two, they're going to focus on all of the contracts that were just signed with big business. But that was going to happen whether Crucial existed or not, whether it did or not. And if it makes sense to sell to consumers, guess what will happen? G-Skill, Kingston, Corsair, they will go to Micron just like they go to Samsung, just like they go to SK Hynix. They will buy up their RAM chips and they will finish them and put a Corsair sticker on it. This doesn't affect the total supply to do it yourself at all. It doesn't. Like everyone I've spoken with behind the scenes. And I didn't actually plan to talk about this. Uh, but wow, are people, and this is where I actually get quite annoyed. I've seen so much rage bait today about Micron killing Crucial as if that's some greedy thing to hurt PC gamers when we all know who the bad guy is. And it's fucking Nvidia and it's fucking OpenAI and their circular AI bubble that's gobbling up the RAM. And there's some weird thing, I must say, going on right now in tech journalism, where people are just scared to blame the people that need to be blamed. Micron wasn't even one of the companies that signed the mega RAM deal with OpenAI. That was Samsung and SK Hynix, and they feel like they were kind of duped. If you want to get mad at someone, gamers, get mad at OpenAI. And to an extent, you should get mad at NVIDIA too for basically just giving them tons of money through debt to fund their bubble. Like, that's who you should be mad at. Um, Crucial going away isn't going to stop Kingston from buying chips from Micron and branding them as their own thing in the future. That's not the issue here. We know who the bad guy is, and I wish more journalists, people who call themselves journalists, would report on what's causing this. It's big AI. It's OpenAI. To an extent, it's NVIDIA, but then it's all of OpenAI's competitors as well that panic bot. That's what's going on. That. And for anyone who doesn't know, check out my my OpenAI dirty DRAM article, and I forgot what the name of it was for the OpenAI like DRAM leak. It's just Google Moore's Law is dead, OpenAI DDR5 or DRAM, and I'm sure the leak will pop up. It's still doing quite well. People are still discovering it. That goes through all the things that caused the current exploding of prices, and none of them were crucial going away. Samsung doesn't have their own brand for this as well. Like again, like G-Skill can buy RAM chips from Crucial, guys. So this isn't making things worse. What's making things worse is the panic buying at AI companies, including, and again, I reported on this in the last Broken Silicon, including apparently OpenAI and actually, from what I can tell, probably Anthropic, going into retailers and physically buying up all the RAM in Best Buys and Micro Centers. That's what's causing this. That is what's causing this. But I wanted to touch on that because, my God, the amount of people talking about this is clearly the thing in the forums to talk about today. All right, let me also say this too. I'm going to get to a discussion now on Steam Machine. This was going to be one of the lead stories, but the RDNA4 pricing and PlayStation stuff took precedence. But I do actually want to talk about the Steam Machine a little bit more here as well. Before I do, please like the video. Like the video. There are over 1,200 of you watching. Let's get to at least 1,000 likes. Please, everyone watching, go down right now and click like. Please. This really does help the channel a ton. And also double check that you are subscribed. When you subscribe, that does help my videos get promoted more by the algorithm, which does help put more food on the table for me, Dan, Gerard. Look at Dan. Dan needs the food now, too. He's been working out so much. He's lost so much weight. Come on. Help Dan put some more food on the table as well. And Carbon Cry and Jean-Philippe Clermont as well. By the way, Jean-Philippe is the person that I hire to render stuff for leaks. Got some fun stuff coming to you for Christmas, just as well. So get ready to see some pictures of some fun upcoming things that I couldn't do unless I worked with sources to get all of the specs and dimensions of something, and then used a renderer that I have to pay, of course, for his work to render them so I can safely leak pictures of things without, leaking a picture of a guy holding it next to his head and then he gets fired, So please make sure you subscribe and support us there as well. But all right, let's get to the Steam Machine. So I've already touched on this to a degree in the recent Broken Silicon, so check that out. There's some stuff in there as well about it, but I want to say that at this point where I am sitting, I really, 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 really think that Valve should consider doing a bare bones edition of the Steam Machine. So here's the current bomb sheet that I put together, like, what was it, like a month ago now? And as you can see, here's the Steam Deck, blah, blah, blah. Here's the Steam Machine. Now, it is worth noting the RAM price that I used for this bomb cost analysis wasn't like when RAM was dirt cheap. I actually put some fat into it because RAM prices were exploding. Now, obviously, RAM prices have exploded even more than when I put this together. So that's a fair point. But I think it's worth pointing out that, and this does include the cost of the controller. People keep asking me of that. Yes, see, input device / controller. Please, people, read things before you ask me questions. But if you look at all of this on here, you can see that if Valve removed the system RAM and then they also removed the SSD, and then actually, if it was up to me, I would also not bundle a controller with it. So what would that get you to? Like $80. So it's like 80 basically, or $78. And then you basically could remove $100. I just think it's worth throwing it out there that if Valve had a bare bones edition of the Steam Machine, which means no RAM, no SSD, and no controller, and I would say no controller because if I got a Steam Machine, I'm going to use keyboard and mouse, or I'll just use a DualSense or something. And my girlfriend has a pink 8-bit DOE controller. One of my friends uses an Xbox controller on PC. I think most people will just use a PlayStation, Xbox, or some other controller they already have. So I would recommend a bare bones edition with no RAM or SSD or controller. You remove all of those things, they could profit at $400 with this thing. I'm just saying they could do that. And again, I want to be clear. Everyone keeps arguing over subsidization. My entire argument for Steam Machine pricing, based on the analysis that I did, that, by the way, Digital Foundry agrees with, and also checks out with my analysis of the Steam Deck bomb costs compared to other analysts' firms that also back came to similar numbers as me. So I'm very sure of my BOM cost sheet here. Again, with the exception of if they haven't bought RAM yet, then they're screwed. But you know, I think they when I say $400 with no RAM, no SSD, no controller, that's with like a 20-30% profit margin. So I think Valve needs to do this. I think it would really behoove them. And my assumption actually is that they have already bought RAM and SSDs for the Steam machine, but they couldn't have possibly bought everything. Well, I guess maybe they did. I don't know, but I find it unlikely they bought everything they'll need for the next 5 years to support the console. So if I was Valve, what I would do is I would have like a $400 to $450 bare bones, no controller model, a $450 to $550 16 gigabyte, 512 gigabyte, also no controller. I would do no controller as well with the 512 gigabyte model that comes with RAM. And then I would do like, yeah, $600, $650 16 gigabyte, 2 terabyte controller model. And what you would do is, I don't know how much RAM they've stockpiled. I don't know. But what I would think the argument would be, let's just make it easy too. Let's just say it's like 650, 550, 450 or something. What they could do is say, here's the bare bones edition for 450. Here's the $550 one, and here's the 650 one. And again, it could be 600, 500, and 400. I don't know. And they would do a launch. The 2 terabyte model that comes with a controller would probably be what most reviewers look at. It would sell out right away. I don't know how many they could make, but let's say they sell 500,000 consoles. They sell like 300,000 half a terabyte, and then 200,000 terabyte ones. And then they just have the bare bones one there. And then that's mostly what you're able to order on the Steam website. But whenever they get a chance to get a good deal on RAM and SSDs, you will see the non-bare bones editions come into stock and you can order them. It's going to be hard to get them. They often won't be in stock. But I'm sorry, I think Valve is going to have to do this to respond to the market, because I do believe there will be RAM shortages at least through the middle of next year and likely till the end of next year, maybe even into the following year. And so we'll see what happens. But I would be very, very surprised if they don't do that. And if they do that, it's a big deal. I want to be clear about this as well. There's a real argument to be made. Like, you could be Valve and you could be like, hey, look, hey, I know you don't probably need our controller. And I know that it sucks you have to supply your own RAM and SSD for the $400 bare bones edition or whatever it costs. But that old HP laptop that you have laying in your closet right now, get out a screwdriver, right? Go get the SSD out of it. We're letting you do that. Like, go, if you have an old mini PC, or again, like an old laptop that might have like an 8 or 16 gigabyte DDR5 stick in it, go get it. I think a lot of people probably do have old laptops lying around right now that could have RAM, and certainly will have an SSD they can pull out. And I think it would really, really, really behoove Valve to offer a bare bones edition, so that if they run out of RAM, if they run out of SSD for reasonable prices, they can continue to sell something, but also they can market it. They can say, go dig up your old laptop and contribute less to e-waste. Pull out that RAM, pull out that SSD, go see if you can get on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, see if you can get a hold of a stick to get that thing running early without having to pay extra. I just think it's common sense. And I'm going to be very surprised if there's not a bare bones edition of the Steam machine at this point. But what do I know? Maybe they won't do it, and maybe they have. Maybe they already bought up. Like, maybe they already bought up 20 million RAM sticks that are in a warehouse somewhere, so they can manufacture, 2 for each console. Maybe they can already manufacture 10 million consoles, and they're just fine with that many total. Possibly. But if I had to guess, they stockpiled, but they only have enough for like the first 6 months of the launch. And they really should offer a bare bones model for those that want to just repurpose old parts from a laptop and don't need a controller. But that's just my 2 cents. I think a lot of people, this continues to be a big discussion point, people arguing over what the Steam machine will cost. And it's kind of turned into everyone arguing about RAM prices and what that means for the Steam machine. A way to flip over the chessboard is just to not include RAM and an SSD and have a tutorial on how to put in your own SSD and RAM. And that would solve the problem. Like, you could still have the fluctuating prices and the more expensive model at the top, but you could still have this anchor at the bottom, a $400 device. Yep, you need your own controller, RAM, and SSD, but it would still act as an awesome check on pre-built costs and undercut the Xbox Series S. you know, if you have an old laptop, you can buy this for $400 and get better than Series S performance. So at least I hope they do that. I just wanted to really give my full attention to that idea because I haven't seen enough people talking about that. But now let me see here. All right, I got a couple of tipped questions. Let me see. We got AMD Linux. A lot of Linux questions here, it seems. I guess actually, yeah, let's get to those first because Linux is, adjacent to the Steam machine. And then I'll get into some reader mail from patrons. Surprise, a lot of your questions have to do with what's going on with RAM prices. So that's going to be most of them. But remember, you can ask me anything right now in the live chat. And I'll notice easier if it's a tip question. So Russell GR7H writes in, thank you for the tip, and says, in Australia, might says AMD or NVIDIA optimizing for Linux gaming. Well, I'm going to be honest with you, my Australian friend from down under. That I don't know what your sentence is asking. AMD or NVIDIA optimizing for Linux. I assume what you're trying to ask is which one is doing it better. And the answer is AMD, undoubtedly. And the reason is everyone's doing the work for AMD. I said this to a game dev. I don't know, last week we were just kind of chatting behind the scenes. I said, could you imagine if the PlayStation 4 through 6 used NVIDIA and the Steam machine or Steam Deck, I should say, used like an ARM or an Intel APU? Like, imagine if AMD didn't get the software benefits of Valve developing Linux and Sony developing FSR and Radeon on the side. I mean, I think Radeon would pretty much be gone if that was true. And that tells you who is better Linux. That's why. Actually, I believe Sony's operating system on their PlayStations is a lower to the metal Barebones version of some Linux distro or like adjacent to it. So like there's all this work to make Linux work well on Radeon and graphics cards and AMD CPUs. And I don't think it's going to be easy for NVIDIA to get a leg up there unless they spent a ton of money. And I don't think it's probably in their interest to it's not like polling them to do that. The business case isn't as obvious as just dumping more money into, AI or something. And it's because AMD just has Valve there. And not just Valve, Valve kicked it off with the SteamOS initiative and with the Steam Deck. But then you also have all of these other developers now working on Linux because of that. You have all these other handhelds that run SteamOS, like Lenovo's handhelds. And because of that, I mean, AMD is just the right. If you're on Linux, you should use AMD. You really should at this point, just because of that massive advantage they have with Valve partnering with them using their hardware, using AMD hardware for all their devices and programming for it, and then causing other developers and companies to program for Linux as well. So is NVIDIA going to work on it more? I don't really know, but I know that for the foreseeable future, I would recommend AMD for Linux. It's just a very easy answer. Mark Man 1 writes and it says, I just got here. Well, welcome, Mark Man. Did the AI bubble burst yet? Let me check my watch. No. I mean, look outside. The AI bubble is still going insane right now. I mean, if I just check the markets right now, my side monitor here. I mean, yeah, I'm not seeing a great collapse in the in the markets right now. I mean, what's Nvidia specifically looking like? Nvidia, OpenAI, and Oracle, I guess, are probably the top ones to watch for this. But pretty much all tech stocks are at this point. Yeah, I mean, no, I'm not seeing any evidence of a collapse right now. Are we seeing signals this could happen? Sure, but never overestimate like the never underestimate the exuberance is how I would put it. Like most of the time too, like if you're thinking of stock advice, which of course this isn't advice legally, but like most of the time with bubbles, it's like the last year of the bubble where most of the gains are made, where it just doubles, triples, quadruples in price before it just goes down. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say exactly where we are in the bubble. It is a bubble. It's obviously a bubble, but no, it has not burst yet. At least I don't know. Could I see it sooner rather than later? I could see it, but I'm not seeing it happen next week right now. I'm just not. Anyways, he also asked, will the Steam frame prices be absolutely insanely high? Thank you for your insight. Well, I mean, what's insanely high for you? Because what is the Quest 3? Isn't it like $500 or something? And that has pancake lenses. I just did an excellent interview with, sadly, it's Bradley. Make sure you check that out if you like VR. Very good episode. He basically outlined that if you take the Quest 3 and you take the Steam frame, it's basically a give or take in terms of features, with the Steam frame having a tad more modularity, so probably a bit more price. So it just depends how aggressive Valve wants to be with the Steam frame. Overall, what I would say is if they wanted to make it $500, they probably could. Given rising prices, though, I would lean more towards 600 to 800, but I would be surprised if it was 1,000. I think I would be. So that's all I can say. Like, I don't know. The problem too with VR devices is I've been off before in my assumptions. Like, I can tell you what it costs to make the device. I literally have the bomb sheets for the Quest 3. I leaked them a couple of years ago. I literally just have the full itemized bomb sheet from Meta. So I do know what these things cost to make. But especially with PlayStation VR 2, I was wrong. I underestimated what the profit margin Sony wanted. I still think Sony was wrong to do that, and it's bit them in the ass when it comes to their VR market share. But what do I really know? So all I can tell you is if they wanted the Steam frame to be the same price or slightly more than the Quest 3, they could. Probably slightly more because economy of scale isn't as high as Meta, but they could probably make it $550, $600 if they wanted to. I just can't promise you that's what they're going to do. Like, do they want that 40% margin? Do they want the extra fat in there to protect themselves from what's going on with RAM? I don't know, maybe, but that's what I would say is I would be surprised at $1,000. But yeah, but it is actually pretty powerful as well. So I could see it. Yeah, I could see 1,000. That would surprise me a bit. My hunch is that they'll go for like between 600 and 800. But I'm not an expert on VR, so don't take this as me like doubling down. By the way, speaking of guests on Broken Silicon, the next guest, if you want to Google his name, is Dave Eggleston. He is a memory and he's like a memory in terms of like RAM, DRAM executive. So I'm going to have on an expert, like someone I believe who's worked at Micron and has been a VP at these companies, to tell us what he thinks is going on, how he thinks prices will evolve. And I think importantly, because he's been in semiconductors in the memory industry for decades, compared to previous memory shortages, because there have been horrible ones I remember being told about, like the 80s or 90s and stuff. And he can remember and tell us, what does this feel like? What can we most compare this to? So if you join the Moore's Laws at Patreon, you can ask this guest questions. I'll put out a request for questions for the guest that I will be talking to on Sunday in like an hour. So if you want to ask like the king of understanding the memory market questions about what's going on with DRAM, join the Moore's Laws at Patreon. Even the lowest tier can ask us questions. That's $1.28. So I'd really recommend that for those, because it does seem like most of the questions are about RAM. I'm going to have the best person you could have on a podcast to ask about RAM later this week. And so don't miss that ability to ask that person questions. All right. Brother Jonesy writes and says, no question, beneficiary of your info for some time now. It helps me in my IT procurement job. I have heard a lot of people, and I've seen some people in the Moore's Laws, the Discord as well, that say that they work in procurement and IT, and they honestly follow Moore's Law's dead leaks to help them with their decision making. So it's cool when I see that, and it makes me feel good. I mean, I want to do this often to help people. I mean, the main reason is I just love talking about this stuff, I'll be honest. But when I see it actually have a positive benefit for someone, that's nice. Spencer Walker gives a super chat. I super chats early before you went live. Take Mo. Okay. Well, thank you, Spencer. All right, let's continue with some RAM questions here from the patrons, which again were submitted for free for supporting the Moore's Laws at Patreon. Salty Internet Pirate writes in and says, with the big Micron news on top of everything else, you should just have the "this is fine" meme in the corner half of the screen. Again, I don't think the Micron thing, that's a red herring. That's just a symptom of what's going on. It's not part of making it worse. It's like the person sneezing. Yeah, they've got snot in their nose. They need to sneeze. You shouldn't be mad at the nose for being sick. It's actually, your sneezing is helping you. So that's not the big deal. The big deal is what OpenAI is doing, buying up all the RAM and all the other companies that compete with them. Compressed AI Blocks writes in, will Micron be back in the consumer segment? It seems wild to just exit the market to me. Why? It's a fraction of their profits. Yes, they will sell their chips to, yeah, so I'm sorry. I was reading my own answer I prepared. Compressed AI Blocks, will they be back in the consumer market? Yes, whenever G-Skill buys memory chips from Micron, just like they do from Samsung, just like they do from SK Hynix. You know, whenever Corsair buys Micron memory chips, that is when they will be back in consumer. Samsung doesn't have some flashy brand. Crucial is just a brand for Micron that they sell themselves to consumer. Samsung doesn't even bother to do that. Where's all the anger at Samsung? They just sell their chips to G-Skill, who overclocks them and does whatever. So, no, don't worry. Will Micron be back in consumer? Yeah, they will. When some of these brands, and they're just brands. They don't actually make the RAM themselves. Buy up their chips and put them in the sticks anyways. Carbon Cry writes in, many decried the evils of DRAM industry after Samsung and SK Hynix said they will focus on long-term profitability instead of doing rapid expansion now, meaning they won't increase CapEx. But is this even relevant? What would more CapEx really do? All of the big three have huge ongoing expansion projects they're doing right now. The lead time to build a new fab is in a year. And with this locked in expansion, Micron retooling and CXMT gobbling up the tools they're allowed to buy, they probably aren't even there isn't even enough equipment to fit out more fabs, even if there was clean room space available. Absolutely. Again, I'm actually getting kind of pissed. Like, some of these journalists and tech tubers need to do their fucking jobs. Like, when you say, and I don't know, right? So I want to be clear. I haven't actually really watched any tech tubers recently, but I have seen people talking on forums. And it's clear some people are calling these companies greedy for doing whatever, right? But it takes years to make these things, okay? To make these, to expand capacity. And they're already expanding. They've already set in motion plans to expand capacity, and they're doing it right now. The shortages, I'm told, will be over by 2028, maybe even by 2027. So you're asking them to take 3 years to make something they're already doing, by the way, but do it more, when they might not even have the equipment to put in there, because all the equipment is accounted for, right? You don't just build a factory and then RAM farts out of it. You then have to go to the company that makes the machinery that makes the RAM and then stuff that supports that machinery. And all that's booked up for maybe the next decade. There's nothing they maybe even can buy there. Now, what could they do? What they could do is push back on the United States government, telling them they can't sell their old DRAM machinery to smaller companies, including companies in China, that could expand capacity. That is something that they could do. But just building another giant cutting edge fab that won't be online for 3 years, so the shortage will already be over. Anyone suggesting that, that's why you're not a CEO. You're going to bankrupt that company. No News writes in and says, can OpenAI really use all of the DRAM it has purchased for its own hardware? I don't know. Does NVIDIA or AMD have any leverage to get some of that OpenAI DRAM stockpile? Maybe. Or does OpenAI think it can get by without those two suppliers? That is something I've been thinking about recently. So for those who don't know, again, I can't recommend checking out my recent OpenAI leaks enough. Please check those out. It's quite a lot. Like, I go through the whole thing on what's going on with DRAM prices, more than I've said today in the live stream. I don't have time nor the want to go through all of it over and over again and all of the detail that you probably want. But read that, watch the video version of that leak. There's an article version on mooreslawsdead.com as well. But a big part of it that I have to tell you just to have this conversation is that OpenAI bought undiced RAM wafers. That means they didn't buy, let me see. They didn't, like, OpenAI isn't buying up this. This isn't the deal for 40% of RAM supply. It's not this. This isn't what OpenAI is buying. I wish I had my wafers. I have silicon wafers around here somewhere. What they bought is those saucers, those shiny saucers, stack them and put them in warehouses. They're not even cut up yet to be put on sticks. And I do believe a large part of that is they were prioritizing taking RAM off the market just as much as they were prioritizing protecting themselves by securing RAM for the future. Yes, I do wonder if they will sell some of that to AMD or NVIDIA. I don't know, though, exactly what wafers, like what types, but like I would wonder if right now what's going on is this was also almost a way for OpenAI to control NVIDIA just as much as NVIDIA is controlling OpenAI's access to hardware. Like, maybe OpenAI is like, all right, NVIDIA, how about this? we'll maybe go with your graphics cards for training our models, but you're actually going to have to work with us instead of Anthropic because we have the RAM. We have the RAM wafers right here, buddy. And if you want to even sell us the graphics cards, you're going to need to buy those wafers from us. Or, maybe they'll use because I think some of the wafers are for like HBM or for LPDDR5X type thing. Well, I don't think it's that, probably for DDR5. But like if you want to build the servers for us, you've got to work with us instead of someone else, anyways. I don't know. I think there's probably something going on there with that, or eventually some partnership will emerge where OpenAI lends RAM to NVIDIA or AMD or both. Yeah, no news. I think something like that's probably going to happen. Clean Sweep writes in and says, what would it take for Intel or any other US company to buy up the old DRAM manufacturing equipment sitting in Korean warehouses and spin up some amount of production? Again, to know where this person's coming from, you really got to watch my other leaks about the OpenAI deals with Samsung and SK Hynix. But point is, there are these old pieces of equipment. When Samsung upgrades their capacity, they take old equipment and they usually sell it to like a small Chinese company. And then that small Chinese company, like when Samsung's updating to make like DDR5 8000, DDR5 10,000 speeds, they might be selling old equipment that a small no-name Chinese brand takes. And what do? Oh, they make DDR5 4800. And most people will go, oh, that's cheap RAM. Oh, that RAM's so 2000. It's so 2022. It's 2026. But, that does help expand capacity. A lot of that equipment, that old equipment, is just sitting in warehouses collecting dust because apparently these firms in Korea are afraid the Trump administration is going to get mad at them and tariff their country if they sell this hardware to Chinese companies, let alone other companies that aren't American. So that's actually publicly been reported on too, not just from what I've heard from my contacts. And what would it take? Trump getting off their ass? I don't know. But that's another thing that's causing this. The tariffs, the anti-trade policies, that is another thing making this situation that would have just been bad, horrible. AI generated fish writes in and says, apparently AI has become a voter issue. Yes, it has. With people overwhelmingly against data centers, probably due to large rising bills. Yes, I've heard horror stories where people's electricity costs have gone up 4x in the Northeast. I can say that my energy bill has gone up at least 50%. I don't think I'm not using 50% more power this year here in Nashville. So yeah, data centers are driving up energy costs. A generated fish says, could this combined with the regulatory pressure from OpenAI's market manipulation be what pops the AI bubble? I don't really think so. I think when it comes to energy, well, I guess yes, if the bubble continues for a full 4 or 5 years and like a new US administration comes in that's very critical of big tech and they're like cut the shit and then new regulations are put in place and blah 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 blah. But even then, I think it's going to be more about expanding energy than it is limiting the amount of energy companies use. So I still don't really see that as what would pop the bubble. I think energy constraints themselves might, like you might see all of this build out and then they just run out of energy and they just like it causes a reckoning where they like look at their financials and go, oh, we actually can't afford to expand because there won't be enough power to run our new data center. And then they look at the numbers and go, wait, we haven't been making any money. And then that leaks out. And then, you have a bunch of companies talk about how they're not making money. Like, I think that could be part of it. But overall, and again, I plugging a lot of things today. Check out the Prof G Markets episode of Broken Silicon. I had an Ed Elson from the Prof G Markets podcast. By the way, Ed Elson, I saw on Twitter, just made the 30 under 30 list for the year. I was crazy. It was just on Broken Silicon. The guy is blowing up right now. Check out that Broken Silicon with Prof G Markets, PROF space G space Markets. That's, I think, the definitive AI bubble popping Broken Silicon that should age very well, that you can refer to for the next year or so. In that, Ed makes a convincing argument that it's all about narrative at this point. A lot of these companies, like, I don't know, like I think it's Palantir is one of them, is like their earnings multiples are just ridiculous, like nonsensical compared to the amount of money, like their valuation is nonsensical compared to the revenue they're bringing in. And so what does that mean? That means it's not about the fundamentals. And anyone on Wall Street that tells you, well, it's about the fundamentals, they're full of shit right now. They're up their own ass. AI is not about the fundamentals. It's about a narrative. It is a narrative at this point. We are way beyond a sensible earnings multiple. It's a narrative. Well, so if the story that's being told is what's driving the AI bubble, it is a narrative shift that will pop it, right? That's common sense, actually. And so I believe it is narrative that will pop it. Now you're already seeing some of this, the bubblings up of what could pop the bubble. You're seeing Sam Altman freak out on podcasts. You're seeing people being very critical of him out of all of a sudden him making desperate moves to buy up all of the world's RAM. Um, Lots of fights between big tech people right now. You're starting to see the rumblings of what could lead to the bubble popping, but it's going to be narrative. It's going to be, I think, personally, um, several quarters of, and it's already happened a little, but like happening more, several quarters of companies looking at their earnings and going, actually, all those people we fired because AI was supposed to replace them, we had to rehire them. We actually had to rehire them, and we've spent like whatever it is, $1 billion on AI build out, and we've made back not just the first year where we didn't really care because it was for the future, but over the past 5 years, we've made back 10 million, like stuff like that. And they'll go, we're axing our AI spending, we're rehiring workers back, and then debt is what is funneling or funding OpenAI right now. You'd see a lot of companies cut back their plans to expand AI, and then you'd see a company like OpenAI go, "Oh, we're out of money." And because they're a private company, it will be probably a surprise to a lot of people because they don't really let people look at their finances. Go Google it right now. Google it right now or chat GPT it. Uh, you know, you'll see that they don't have lawyers or finance people really looking over their numbers. It's kind of a trust me, bro situation. And so if you have a bunch of people funneling debt to fuel OpenAI, and then eventually they stop giving them a bunch of IOUs, once the IOUs dry up, it might turn out that OpenAI doesn't have the money to keep expanding. And then people become critical. There's an audit. The audit's horrible. Crash, burn. That's what I think would do this. But it would be started by the narrative changing, by the people just not looking the other way over and over and over, nonstop, nonsensical comments about what's going on. By the way, this is the hourly, I feel like in my life right now, disclaimer. I use AI. I don't think AI is going away. I think AI is here to stay. I just think that the bubble is grossly inflated and we're nowhere near as close to AGI as people think we are. I mean, just look at the videos of robots falling over, or the fact that the robot assistant you can buy right now is actually some dude in a cubicle wearing a VR device, remote controlling the robot. So, like, that tells you we're just not even close. We're really still not. And the narrative needs to change that. Curry King 3 writes in and says, aside from price volatility, what do you think are the short-term, mid-term, and long-term outcomes of the increasing trend of sending world's processing power into data centers? What sales of computing services are these data centers providing to justify their investment? I mean, the outcome of this, other things become more expensive. A lot of companies will get pissed off. Like, I do think this is interesting, don't you? Like, all these partnerships, like OpenAI with Microsoft and OpenAI, with like maybe I don't know if it's with HP, but with like some of these OEMs, like an OpenAI partnership to have it in their laptops. Don't you think some of these companies would then get pissed, like Microsoft, that the Xbox, they don't have RAM to make Xboxes anymore? Maybe not. They don't really care about Xbox and Microsoft, but like, you think HP would get pissed, Dell would get pissed, and they go, fuck OpenAI. I don't really want to partner with the people who bought up all the RAM we were hoping to put in our Gorgon Point and Panther Lake laptops next year. Well, let's partner with one of these companies that isn't being this crappy towards us. So I think short term, you're going to see a lot more knives come out against each other in Silicon Valley. I think you're going to see a lot more knives out as they become more desperate and more greedy. Long term, look, if the bubble ever really pops in a big way, there's just going to be unprecedented e-waste. Now, some of that will be good for us consumers. You will see the market flooded with RAM. You'll probably see budget server builds where people are buying up, you know, like like 16 core epics that come with ECC memory for a fraction of what they paid for them. The stuff that we often saw back in the day with like the cycling of Intel products, where you'd buy up like a Haswell E server CPU for like $200 with 10 cores, when 10 cores were usually $2,000 back then. I think that's what you'll probably see. There'll be some of that, but there's just gonna be a lot of waste. I think there's just gonna be a lot of waste as well, and that's unfortunate. But it seems like this is the direction the industry is hell bent on going in. So, what can you do? All right, now I have some more tipped questions I want to get to here. Let me write down that last one was RAM and AI bubble. Let me put down another timestamp here for 50 super. Rodiculus 9464 writes in, thank you for the tip, and says, is the 5080 Super canceled? Should I get a 4090 or 5090? This seems to happen every live stream. Shopping advice. What do they cost right now? Have their prices gone up at all yet? Because where I'm sitting, I was right about the 5090 pricing. I think you can still sometimes find it near MSRP, but I think the 5090 is already screwed, right? By the way, remember that WCCF Tech report attacking me saying the 5090 wasn't going to go up in price? How you like me now, motherfucker? Yeah, that's right. The 5090 did go up in price in quarter 4, like I told you guys it would. But stop listening to the people that keep lying and attack this channel, guys. Come on. But yeah, so the 5090 is $3,000 from where I'm sitting. I guess I'll check Micro Center because it is often cheaper there. I've noticed recently. 5090. No, I don't want it to ship. Yeah, I mean, like, it's pretty much the same at this point. It was a little cheaper for a while at Micro Center, but no, so Micro Center does still have a couple $2,000 5090s. I mean, look, if it's at the Micro Center near you, what am I looking at? Oh, that one's shippable. Is that one shippable too? Wow. Yeah, so I guess Newegg has gone up in price first, but it looks like I'm looking at the Santa Clara, which I believe is one of the newer Micro Centers. If you check out them, you can still sometimes find a 5090 for MSRP. So if you can get a 5090 for MSRP, and especially, by the way, NVIDIA just added PhysX support to Blackwell. Thanks, NVIDIA. What the hell was that about? I would just get the 5090 for $2,000 now. I think it's going to hold its value next year. I'm happy with a 4090. I frankly have a small form factor PC where I don't want a 5090 in my build. Nor do I really think I need more performance than a 4090. Frankly, I don't think I need more than a 9070 XT. But I would probably just get it now. Now, what's funny is, what is the 4090? Because in my experience, the 4090s cost almost the same as 5090s because people consider the 5090s to be unreliable. Yeah, they are. The 4090s are more, if anything. Obviously, because they're not making them anymore, but still, I find that very funny how much the 4090 has held its value. So I honestly wouldn't get the 4090 now that they've added PhysX support to the 5090 and their drivers have finally started working compared to when Blackwell launched. If you can get a 5090 for $2,000 and you have the money, I would get that now. I would not wait for Super. Honestly, I wouldn't. And then when it comes to 5080 Super, I don't know that 5080s have ever really been a good deal. I've actually kind of always hated it's just so funny. The 80 series used to be legendary, and then ever since the ever since the 2080, but especially ever since I kind of hate the 80 series since the 2080. I mean, that thing was overpriced, only 8 gigabytes of RAM. 3080, 10 gigabytes was not enough, and that was usually like $1,200. 4080 was a joke compared to the 24 gigabyte 7900 XTX. I'm just not a little bit of a 80 hater at this point. Let me look though here. 5080. Yeah, so look, you can still get the 5080 for MSRP at Micro Center. Check your local mom and pop retailers too. Let me say that as well. They often have good prices. Yeah, I mean, look, there's a 5080 almost for MSRP on Newegg. So I would buy now. Now, I don't recommend the 5080. I mean, I would say you actually want the 5070 Ti, just the cheapest NVIDIA 16 gigabyte. Right. So that's still around MSRP, sometimes maybe below. That's what you want to get. What about 9070 XT? I know those prices are starting to rise. Have we completely missed the boat? Nope. There's a 9070 XT 16 gigabyte on Newegg right now for $600. That is what I would recommend. Get the 9070 XT now. If you're made of money, Get the 5090 now. I would not wait. I would not wait at all. Prices are going up. I opened this video by telling you guys prices are going up for graphics cards. I've actually got now a context providing me with the amount they're going to go up. Some examples. It's going to go back to like kind of launch RDNA4 pricing. I wouldn't wait. I would get these graphics cards now because I still kind of hear, to answer your question, by the way, is the 5080 Super canceled? I still kind of hear that the Super Series might come out, but if it does, it sounds like end of next year, early 2027. And then maybe they're delaying 6000 series because of AI. Now, AI bubble pops, all of this can change, but I would not wait for Super at this point. Not while graphics cards are at or below MSRP. I don't really see the point in waiting. Just don't get a 12 gigabyte card. That's what I would say. Don't get a 12 gigabyte card. Like, don't be a. Can you guys still hear me? All right, well, we're gonna see if you guys can hear me. It's back? Oh my god, this is like the first time in the channel's history that the stream had an issue and a new live stream. I would have just ended it early, guys. Oh, thank God. Ugh, I like almost had a heart attack. It's first time in history. The stream dies and I don't have to send you guys a new link. Thank God. Anyways, let's continue. I just got done ranting about the graphics card stuff, so that's probably a perfect cutting off point to move on to CPU questions. I believe there's no other tipped questions there. Oh no, there are some other ones. If I remember correctly, too, when the stream died, what was the person asking me? Someone tell me in the Moore's Laws of Discord. What was it? What did that person ask? I don't know, but anyways, Charitard writes in and says, "Did they add 32-bit physics just to the 5090?" No, I believe it's to all of Blackwell. And then MDK God 43 writes in, "What's up, big fan? Also, AMD is poop. Nvidia for life." I mean, look, man, I'm using an RTX 4090 in my main system. My laptop, which is my favorite laptop I've ever owned, is a Strix Halo laptop. Obviously, I've got a 9070 XT right back there. I've got AMD in my PlayStation 5 Pro. I've got Nvidia and the Switch 2 in this house. Don't be a fanboy. All right. AMD is definitely not poop, or everyone wouldn't be partnering with them right now for gaming devices. So let's just leave it at that. And say, don't be a fanboy. Don't be a fanboy, everybody. All right. Yes, it does feel like Nvidia may have just attacked me while I was trying to say something. Let us move on to some CPU questions, though. All right. Can't wait to see what this looks like in the replay, too. Like what that crash looks like. I might have to edit that out. Let me see here. All right. AI generated fish writes, and it says DRAM prices will make PC products, including laptops, more expensive. And we're looking at no new CPUs or GPUs, just refreshes, if at all. Is this going to be the least interesting CES in recent memory? I mean, like, what was at the other CES? No, I don't think so. AI generated fish. Remember we all thought RDNA4 was going to be announced CES 2024, and it was like basically not. Like they were like, here's a graphics card, but we can't say what it is. So we didn't get that. We didn't even really get Strix yet. Oh, or am I thinking of 23 for Strix? When did Zen 5 come? Yeah, that would have been 23 though. But like one of it then Strix came out. Let me look that up. AI 370 release. Because I am blanking right now. June 2024. Yes, okay. So no, I remember correctly. Like at the beginning of 2024, is that correct? It did launch. Okay, it did launch 2024. Because Hawk Point would have been announced. Oh, right. Yeah, 24, not 25. Okay. I apologize for just having the biggest brain fart in history in front of all of you. Please forgive me. But so what was interesting about 25 CES? Strix was already out, right? Uh, and RDNA4 didn't even get announced. So I think at this CES, we're going to have a ton of stuff with Panther Lake. Gorgon Point, I think, could actually be a solid uplift. I think we'll see partners showing off some new Strix Halo products, which, again, I want to say this as well. Strix Halo is going to have a moment early next year because it comes pre-manufactured and bundled with LPDDR5X, meaning it might avoid some of the RAM issues short term. Long term, no. And I already do hear about some companies buying up Strix Halo to use for servers and for dev kits because, well, at least you can get that thing with a decent amount of RAM and it's strong enough. But I think, no, I think at CES, Strix Halo is going to have a moment. Panther Lake will be interesting. Gorgon Point will be worth looking at. And remember, at the beginning of this year, 2025, there was no RDNA4. There weren't really new APUs. Arrow Lake was a dud. So, no, I think next CES might be more interesting. Remember also, 9850X3D, 98950X3D2, I actually think could be very interesting CPUs. I just put out a leak about, the Steppings leak talking about how they're actually probably going to be faster than people think and that they use new silicon. So there's no reason to not be excited for Zen 5 X3D. By the way, AI generated fish is the resident CES hater. I'm just calling him out on that one there. In good faith and with love, but it does feel like half of your questions for the fans of Moore's Law is Dead who listen to every piece of content feels like AI generated fish. Every comment is hating on APUs and CES. Come on. David writes in, with talk of possible Zen 6 high-end desktop delay, any chance of the 9950X3D2 with an updated I/O die for improving DDR5 speeds and cross ECD latency, both relevant to the AM5 workstation? No, I maybe the maybe the I/O die for the Zen 5 refresh chips that come out at CES or early next year. Maybe it'll get a new stepping for that as well, and they'll have some improvements to a degree, but it's not going to be an overhaul of the whole design. That's going to be Zen 6, and I don't see AMD spending time on that. I think they're just going to wait, and you'll just get a fantastic new I/O die, which I've already leaked pictures of actually, for Zen 6 a year after that. I don't think they're going to bother going through all of that effort. The only reason you would do that is if Zen 6 wasn't coming out until the end of 2027, but that is not what I hear. I still think laptop Zen 6 in some form will launch before the end of next year. You'll have desktop at the end of next year or early the following year, or maybe mid 27. We'll see. I don't think like that's enough time to put all this effort into a Zen 5 Plus yet. And in fact, they're doing new steppings though, and adding more cache and upping the TDPs, better binning for the 9850X3D and the 9950X3D2. I think that's enough, to still be more than just a boring refresh. Like the most boring CPU refresh I remember is the Zen 2 ones. What was it? Was it the 3? Was it what is it? The 3, not the 3950, the 3920. I don't remember. Oh no, it was the 3900 XT, the Ryzen 9 3900 XT instead of X and 3800 XT. That was boring. AMD seems to be doing more than that with the 9950 X3D2 and 9850 X3D. So no, it's not a new IO die. It's not Zen 5 Plus, but it's better than what they've done before, from what I can tell. So I'm curious about it. Hopefully, we're not disappointed. Compressed AI Blocks writes in, what happens to current X3D Zen 5 products once the 50X3D and X3D2 come out? Do they stay on the market and get priced accordingly, or are these just full replacements? I think to a degree, the replacements, I don't even need sources to tell you this. I think you can just look at AMD's X3D refresh history. Like the 5800 X3D comes out with Zen 3, right? And then eventually the 5700 X3D, 56, 5500 X3D, 5800 X3D goes away. They never launched an 850, but if they would have, that would have probably been the focus. But they kind of did, right? Because then Zen 4 comes out and you have the 7800 X3D here. And then down here, you have the 5500 X3D for budget systems. And then what happens? Well, Zen 5 comes out. And what do we have? You have the 9800 X3D here, but then they also start launching planning 7500 F, 7500, 7600 X3Ds that will be sold below it. I think it's going to be a similar thing. I think short term, they'll sell both, but long term, you're going to have this 9850 X3D just basically replacing the 9800 X3D. And then at the bottom, you'll probably have like a 7500 X3D from Zen 4 and a 9700 X3D. They'll send the best binnings up here and then they'll eventually save new worse yields of the new binnings for like something else. Like that seems to be the pattern AMD always does. So yeah, I mean, short term they might sell them at the same time, but long term you'll have an ultra budget X3D emerge below what they used to have, and then above what they used to have, they'll keep selling. Another Chris writes in, "Hey Tom, will AMD continue to release the first round of non-Vcache CPUs and then the Vcache CPUs, or will this gap shorten?" Oh, so you're asking for like Zen 6 or maybe even Zen 7, will the Vcache models launch at the same time? Too soon to say. It seems pretty clear to me that they were probably going to do what they always do. Like they were planning initially to launch Zen 6 without X3D, probably quarter 3 or 4, 26, and then launch Vcache the following quarter or two, like early 27. At this point, it sounds like Zen 6 might be delayed a bit due to issues with N2X. So I don't really know what that means, though. Like, does that mean AMD is going to launch N2P? Because remember, laptop Zen 6, which should still launch next year, uses 2 nanometer chiplets, N2P specifically, not N2X, which is having the node issues at TSMC. Or I don't know if issues, but delays. Uh, so that could still be shared. They're going to share those CCDs, the N2P ones, not the N2X, the N2P ones with laptop and with server. There's no reason they couldn't do an early launch of like Zen 6 where maybe they don't have the whatever you want to call it, the 10800X ready, but maybe they use N2P and have a 10700X ready and a few other things. And maybe those aren't 7 gigahertz or even 6.8. Maybe those are like 6.5 gigahertz. And then they just launch that first. And then 2027, they launch N2X with Vcache. That's kind of what I'm assuming they'll do. But for all I know, the 9950X 3D2 is going to be surprisingly a decent uplift, and that will just carry them through 26, and they'll just delay everything to launch with Vcache in 2027. I don't know. It also depends on when Nova Lake comes out and how good that is. So far, even though I've leaked all of this stuff about Nova Lake, including, by the way, the amount of cache it has, long before recent reports kind of just said the same thing this channel already said. Besides that, though, you don't see the evidence that Nova Lake is. I shouldn't say this. It seems like Nova Lake could get delayed too. So we need to know, when is Nova Lake coming out late next year? Is Nova Lake going to live up to expectations? That is to say, it needs to destroy the 9950X3D2 just by double digits and be clearly poised to be able to withstand Zen 6. Does it suck? If Nova Lake ends up sucking, I don't know why AMD would rush out Zen 6. They might just wait to launch everything at once with Vcache in the middle of 2027. So I think it's still too soon to say on that one. Another Chris. But I would hope at some point they do all the launches at the same time. But it's already become more compressed, right? Like Zen 3X 3D launched what? It was like a year and a half, or at least a year after the normal Zen 3 launched. And then Zen 4X 3D, to my memory, launched much sooner, but still like half a year later. And then Zen 5X 3D launched like what, a quarter or two late. It's becoming more compressed over time, but it still seems like they think it's worth getting out the initial stuff first, as soon as possible and not waiting. We'll see. Florida Man writes in, will we be getting new motherboards with Zen 6 and Zen 7? What feature improvements could we expect on those boards? I think by Zen 7. I still don't have any proof of Zen 6 getting a new motherboard, though. And if I'm being honest, right, isn't like, what would that be called? Would that be called AMD Z? What were they called? Extreme. Not Z. Was it 70? What were their motherboards? 870 AMD motherboard. Right, because they have right now the 870. Now, are they on this yet? Let's see here. 970. No. So, yeah, there's still room for another one. But I got to say, I leaked motherboard details about what Zen 4's motherboards were going to be. When did I do that? Let's look here. AM5 motherboard leak. I bet if I just Google it, Moore's Law is dead. Let me see. Image search. Where was that one? Was it this here? I don't know. I remember I put out some leaks for the Zen 4 motherboards, like probably, let me see, stream pricing. Was it really in this leak as well? Let me see here. Because I remember opening up. Screw it. I give up trying to find this here. But because like that's what you need to look at. Like how soon did I leak the X670? That's right. It was X670. Then they skipped 7 to go to. That's why I was confused because AMD loves to make. Yeah, all right. I found Anthony Gareffa's reporting on this. Yep. So let me share my screen here. Where are we? There. And make sure no personal information is there. It is not. Like, so there was this reporting here, right, in June of 2022. So that was almost half a year before Zen 4 came out. And that's when I started having a bunch of those leaks, right, about it. So I guess it's still a little early, but I have to say, and what I took a long winded way of getting to is saying, I will be skeptical that Zen 6 gets new motherboard chipsets if we don't hear a lot. Pretty much, yeah, by like May or June next year. So it's still a little early, but I would say I'm still a little surprised that we haven't seen anything yet if Zen 6 is getting new motherboards, right? Like, remember Intel? We got Meteor Lake motherboard chipset leaks. And Meteor Lake didn't even end up coming to desktop like what a year or two before it was canceled before like not even coming out. Like, so usually we get these things about a year ahead of time. Uh so I don't know, you know. And if I think about everything I've seen with Zen 6 so far, right now everything still seems to reference 870 Extreme. So, what I would say is I hope they have new motherboards for Zen 6 that give you new PCI, more, not new, more PCIe lanes, but it wouldn't surprise me if AMD goes budget. Like if AMD says, Intel's going to have these new expensive Nova Lake motherboards, we're just going to keep our motherboards $200 and less. Yes, there'll be some $300 ones where they're trying to sell $500 motherboards. And then the big motherboard uplift will be Zen 7. Zen 7 should get new motherboards. It's going to be basically HEDT grade with its 32 cores that are each twice as fast as Zen 5 cores. I mean, that's going to be crazy. So I think Zen 7 might get new motherboards. Who knows? Maybe even PCIe Gen 6 support. Remember, though, that's years from now. But I'm still not sure what's going on with Zen 6. I think it's 50-50 for Zen 6. I hope they have a new motherboard chipset come out, but I think it's still probably 50-50. And now I'm sure there's, speaking of 50-50, but there's a 50-50 chance that a source of mine just emails me after this live stream and tells me I'm wrong. That's how half my leaks come out, by the way, is a source watches my video and goes, "Oh, I forgot to tell you something." All right, let's get through the rest of these questions, shall we? Another Chris writes in again and says, question, is there backstory to the Goblin Grimlock? He seems like an all-powerful wizard, but seriously, even on N2P, this thing is going to be super powerful. Mysterious cackles. Yeah, he's referencing Grimlock, the funnest name for a code name I've ever seen. But yeah, I think it's like some like cave goblin troll thing is Grimlock. If you Google it, that's what the mythical creature is for Zen 7. Now, he says even on N2P. No, Grimlock's on A14 from what I've seen, not N2P. So that's another multi-node jump from where Zen 6 will be. That's exciting. Let me put that down here too. Around here. New AMD motherboards. Grimlock. Dylan M writes in, hi, Tom. Do you think AMD ARM CPUs like Soundwave will remain low end, or do you think that they will make their way up the price stack? What's the real benefit on desktop? Nothing. Also, what share of desktop and laptop do you think ARM will have in 2028 or 2030? I don't know. I haven't looked at those numbers recently. I'm not going to bother talking about Windows on ARM market share. It says also, have you heard anything about Intel ARM? And does Intel? No, I don't. I've not heard a single thing about Intel working on an ARM CPU. I mean, who knows? Again, maybe this is like that thing I just joked about. Maybe a Intel source will email me right after this and say, actually, we are. But from what I can tell, Intel is not working on anything ARM right now. Now, when it comes to Soundwave, I seem to get a Soundwave question at least once a month. That's like, will Soundwave be high end? And I've already leaked it. No, it looks kind of like a Mendocino successor. Like from what I remember, I mean, this will pop up quickly if I Google it, I am sure. Soundwave Moore's Law is dead. If I just Googled this, leak. Let's see here. Right. It has a decent NPU, and I'm on notebook check. Yeah, there's my leak. So let me share my screen again. So if you look at this old leak of mine, 2 P cores, 4 E cores, only 4 megabytes of L3 shared between these, 4 RDNA 3.5, although I believe some documents said 3.5 plus. No, by the way, I've seen people misreport on this. 3.5 plus doesn't mean there's like a RDNA 3.75. RDNA 3.5 plus means 3.5 or later. So it could be RDNA 5, right? It could get RDNA 5 or RDNA 4. But point is only 4 compute units. A decent amount of mall cache, though. So that's interesting. And a powerful AI engine. So when you look at this, it's not like the worst thing in the world, right? It gets 6 cores. It has a decent memory controller, probably to power that NPU. But this doesn't, to me, look like something that even really succeeds Strix Point, let alone something up at the top of the stack like Strix Halo or Medusa Halo. So no, this is meant for like budget ARM semi premium. Like this is meant to undercut the Qualcomm X Elite, I think. That sort of a thing. This is not meant to be some high end thing. And that's because x86 architectures are more powerful than ARM right now. I'm sorry, they are. Like I know there's the armchair, if you will, experts here who keep saying everything should be ARM, but from what we've seen from Lunar Lake and Strix, you can make x86 every bit as efficient as ARM. And when you go to high performance, the highest performance architectures are still x86. So I think for budget, you'll see ARM stuff, but I don't really see ARM taking over premium CPU, at least for client stuff or the highest performance like Epic stuff anytime soon. All right, let's see. Now we are done with most of the CPU questions here, but we have a bunch of more console-ish questions. And so let us get to that. Let's see. Let's see. Steam on PS6, Steam Machine, Magnus. So let's get all the consequences. So Charitard writes in and says, can you comment on PS6 Steam rumors? Yes, that was the question that the cutoff stopped me from answering. I apologize for not answering that sooner. Thank you for the tip again, Charitard. But I did see this headline, Steam on PlayStation. And then let me type in rumor. Da, da, da. Yeah, I mean, I don't know who Hip Hop Gamer is. I don't know. Like, if I go to, let me see what NeoGaf thinks here. I don't want to hate because there's a lot of people that see my leaks and they talk shit about me and they don't know me. Um, but I'm not seeing multiple rumors on this, and I haven't heard anyone say that to me. So I find it unlikely Steam comes to PlayStation personally. That really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Um, you know, I guess I can ask around. I look, there's developers that watch this who are my source. Some of them are my sources. Reach out to me on Discord or email me. Have you heard if you're a developer that Steam's coming to PlayStation? I guess you probably wouldn't have because this would be something Sony would keep secret, but I find it unlikely. Like it doesn't make any sense to me why Sony would do that. The only way I could see Steam coming to PlayStation is if there was like some macro level gambit going on behind the scenes that Valve and Sony were preparing to screw over Microsoft that no one saw coming. Like, and I'm trying to steel man right now the argument for why Steam could or would come to PlayStation. I'm not saying I agree with this, but I'm just doing this for fun. So the argument for Steam coming to PlayStation in my mind would be that Sony sees the cross buy feature of Xbox as a weakness to them for Sony that Microsoft offers this feature. And so Sony wants that. And so what they do is instead of launching their own PlayStation launcher, they go to Valve and they say, hey, here's what we can do. We can either launch our own PlayStation launcher and we can pull all of our PlayStation games from the Steam store. And we're going to offer the ability for people to get a PC key for every game they buy for their PS6. And that will compete with you, Steam. Or what you can do is if they buy the game on Steam, we get, of that 30% cut you take, we get 20. Or we split it 15%, because everyone, just so you don't, most stores, or most of the biggest, most successful stores, like the PlayStation Store, I think Nintendo at least, and Steam, they take a 30% cut of every software sale. So a game is sold for $50 on Steam. That means $15 of that goes to Valve. Same, I believe, with PlayStation. So maybe Sony goes to Valve and says, how about this? We don't want to launch our own launcher. Frankly, we think most launchers have failed, but we will do it if we need to. What if you gave us half the cut? It won't give the person the game on PlayStation. What we're going to do, though, is say, hey, if you buy a game on PlayStation, you get that game on Steam. And if you buy it through the PlayStation Store, like a semi-merging of our stores, where some of the games we split some of the profits if it's bought in a certain place. What do you think, Valve? This will allow us to advertise PlayStation there more, and this will also allow you to share select games on PlayStation. This will allow PlayStation users to download a Steam app. On the Steam app, they can talk to their friends. Maybe they can boot up Battlefield, and it'll integrate with Steam in addition to the PlayStation Network, which already has crossplay. Like, maybe this could be Sony saying, hey, half of the games out there already have crossplay with Steam. Let's just add a Steam app anyway. So it's kind of like Discord, and you can communicate with your friends on Steam through PlayStation. And also, if you buy a game on PlayStation, some of them will give you a Steam key if it's a PlayStation exclusive. But we want more of a cut of those games that are sold on Steam that are PlayStation. In return, we will put Steam on PlayStation, advertising your products as well. Could something like that happen? I don't know. That's my steel man for it. But at this point, I would not take these rumors seriously. There. But can I come up with one? Yes, but I can come up with a lot of things. I'm pretty good at coming up with ways for things to make sense and over rationalizing them. So, but that's the only argument I could hear, is like Sony didn't want to launch their own PC launcher. They think long-term exclusives are not going to be the main way they make money. And so they partner with Valve to get more of a cut of their games sold on Steam, in return for letting Valve have an app on PlayStation that lets you share some content between platforms. I don't know. I guess that's a thing, but I've not heard about this, and I just leaked a bunch of stuff about PSSR and all these other things. So there's, at least as of this second, no developer has told me, by the way, they're telling us Steam's coming to PlayStation. We got to get our games ready. So I'd be very apprehensive to take those rumors seriously as of now. Pool842 writes in, thank you for the tip, and says, your news is always getting me stoked. Just joining now, so starting from the beginning. Can't miss all the good stuff. Well, eventually you'll see me read your question. Thank you. Let me continue I see we have some tipped questions, but let me continue the console-ish questions first. No News writes in, Valve continues to gain influence in the gaming industry, yet the leaked information from Valve and its partners is scant, at least on the hardware side. Software side, we see them contributing heavily to projects, graphics drivers, compatibility layers, blah, blah, blah. Is Valve really that tight of a ship, or just sailing under the radar? So I liked this question. And the question basically is, how do so many Valve leaks not leak sooner, even though they make hardware? Well, first of all, there's a lot of answers to this. Like Steam Deck 2. Why don't we know the specs of Steam Deck 2? I don't think they have them yet. I have access to some pretty extensive, let's say, lists of information at AMD. Nothing's listing a Steam Deck 2. And I have code names for all types of stuff that I haven't leaked yet. I'm telling you, nothing lists Steam Deck 2 yet. So my impression is that the Steam Deck 2 just does not exist. That probably deep inside the vaults of Valve, they have a concept of what they want it to be. They've already talked about this. They have performance metrics they want it to hit. They probably have the overall concept in their heads, and they've got some groundwork for what they want it to do, but they haven't chosen an APU or anything. So that's why that wouldn't have leaked yet. Now, what about the Steam machine? What's to leak? It uses hardware that's been out for over a year. I mean, the graphics card, by the time it comes out, it's gonna be like 3 years old. So there's really nothing to leak. You know what I like? When you think about my PS5, my PS6 leaks, like Canis and Orion, yeah, those leaks stick out in AMD documents because there's code names like Orion and Canis and Zen 6C and RDNA4 and all of this special stuff we haven't seen anywhere else. Why would anyone, except for the most razor-eyed people, like sadly it's Bradley. Again, check out that podcast he was just on, Broken Silicon. Like, why would anyone pay attention to these little things, that aren't really new hardware? So that's point number two. Point number three, Valve is like what? A private company of 400 people? How many does Nvidia have now? Isn't it like 50, 40,000 people? AMD is over 30,000. I think Intel's over 100,000. Why do you guys think I'm able to leak Intel information often years before there's over 100,000, maybe not over now, but around 100,000 people work at Intel, at least recently. Like the attack surface is huge. So Valve is a much smaller company that does way less things. That's why their stuff doesn't leak as often. And even then, there were Deckard leaks and these leaks from Sadly It's Bradley years ago. So I'd actually push back a bit and go to the people that are paying as much attention to Valve, like Sadly It's Bradley, as I pay attention to a company like Nvidia or AMD. To me, it seems like there are leaks actually pretty early for Valve. It's just they don't do as much and its stuff doesn't stand out as much. So that's my answer to that question. Bespoke exclamation point writes in and says, do you think there will be a need for a mid-gen PS6 or Magnus Pro, or will upgrading to the latest version of PSSR and FSR every couple of years be more than enough? Because it seems like if the PSSR2 update for PS5 Pro looks even half as good as FSR4 does on PC, that upgrade alone is going to make an even bigger difference than base PS5 to PS4 PS5 Pro. Yeah, I don't think it'll be bigger than that, but it might be comparable, actually. That's funny to think. And if you do think they will do a PS6 Pro, do you think the handheld will get a Pro model as well? I don't. So if I were to guess, and it is a guess, let me put down a timestamp here because I'm sure some people will want to hear about this. PS6 Pro expectations. So this is a guess. This is speculation. This is not a leak. But you know, I would expect what's going to happen with PS6 is late, and again, I could see it going many different ways, but here's my guess. Late 2027, Sony launches the PlayStation 6 desktop or home console, and then they also launch the PlayStation 6 handheld. I don't know what the price they will choose now with what's going on with RAM, but let's say it's reasonable. Let's say Sony launches the PS. Let's just kind of split the difference between the pessimism and the optimism. Let's say the PS6 home console launches for $650 without a disk drive, but you can use your own disk drive, your old one. So you can carry over disk drives from gen to gen. That would be nice. And they're like, yep, $650 for the PS6. And then they're like $499, $50 more than the Switch 2 was. I think that's more than fair, but still, getting a profit. So they go to $499 for the PS6 handheld. And then that's what they sell probably for a year. And then what I think they will do is they will save up the leakiest yields of the PS6 handheld APU, codename Canis. Right? They're not even disabling any of the parts of the die that will go into the PS6 handheld. So my suspicion is that they would take the yields, which will be most of them because it's such a tiny die on a mature node, on a advanced node. They'll take half, most of the yields or something, maybe 70% of them, and those will be the 1.6 gigahertz handheld edition. And they will just churn that out through the end of 27 through 2028. And then my suspicion would be late 28 or maybe 2029, what they do is they launch a 299 PS6S, and this is the yields of the APU for the handheld that use more energy, right? Like maybe they're like, these are the ones that are 1.6 gigahertz or higher, but instead of pulling 10 watts, these things pull 20 watts. We had to really crank up the voltage to make them work. And whatever though. So it's like an overall like 50-watt or even 30-watt console that's like, this big. And that's when they launch their budget edition after they've saved up yields of that. That would be my guess. And then, so what did I say that was? 7 was launch, 8 or 9 was S. And then, yeah, I'd think 2030. So 3 years into the console generation, They'll probably do 4 years again like the PS5 Pro because there's no rush. They'll probably launch some PS6 Pro if they feel like they need to. I don't know if they will though, because without Xbox competing, which remember, there was going to be an Xbox Series Elite. There was. I had some early information on it. You can Google it. I put out leaks. I never had any specs for it, but I was told it was definitely a thing. And to this day, I was told that they canceled it last minute. But that means that Sony spent all this money making the PS5 Pro for a competitor that never showed up. And they felt like probably because of GTA 6 eventually coming out, they're like, let's do it. Let's launch the PS5 Pro. Why not? Also, we can use this as a chance to test out a higher price point. Oh, look, it's selling okay. All right, maybe we can charge 600 or more for the PS5. So I think that's what the PS5 Pro was. So yeah, that's what I think they'll do. 27 launch of the handheld and the home console. A couple years later, they launched the PS6s, maybe just a year later. And then after that, like a year or two after that, they do a PS6 Pro. That'd be my guess, but I'm not 100% sure, at all. That's just speculation. And I could easily see it going to maybe the PS6s comes out at launch with limited availability. Maybe there is no PS6 Pro. I don't really know that they will need a PS6 Pro, and I know they didn't really want one for the PS5, so there might not be one at all. Dark Helmet writes in and says, I'm considering getting into VR for Flight Simulator 2024, possibly with the Steam frame. My system is a 7950 X3D and a 7900 XTX. Okay, so not a slouch. The game's performance monitor indicates that I'm primarily CPU limited, even at 4K, with high to ultra settings on both urban and scenic flights. On scenic flights, I see 60 FPS, but in places like New York City, I'll get in the high 30s. Enabling FSR3 with quality doesn't improve FPS. That's weird. It should. I know VR generally needs high FPS to avoid motion sickness, but is a slow movement game and good enough unless you're flying low and fast. I mean, look, you want higher frame rates in VR. I would say that Flight Simulator is not like super hot, where you definitely want really fast frame rates because you're moving with a bunch of things next to you. Like you will get motion sick if you don't have higher frame rates with things that move around, like Half-Life Alex, when you're literally just jumping around things. Like I remember jumping, laying down, throwing a grenade in Half-Life Alex. Like you want a high frame rate. Not as important sitting in the cockpit of a plane in Flight Simulator 2024. Having said that, 30 frames per second is pretty low. I would stay away from frame generation, and I would say, look, man, you're gonna have to turn down some settings. You're gonna want to get to 60 um minimums for VR at least, I think. And I think you'll probably be happy with that in Flight Simulator 2024. But a final thing to note here is that's really weird that FSR didn't boost your frame rate, in my opinion. I hope you don't mean with frame gen. I hope you just mean you turn on like quality mode without frame gen and that didn't do anything. If that's true, that's an obvious CPU limit. But you have a 7950 X3D. To me, it sounds like the game isn't utilizing the Vcache side of your CPU. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I know nothing about Flight Simulator effectively. But that's what that looks like to me. I basically have the same CPU as you, and even though with NVIDIA's CPU overhead, it sometimes limits frame rates, there's like no game where I'm really limited below like 144. So yeah, I think it might be misusing your CPU and not using the right CCD. Disable the non Vcache CCD and see if that helps. If it doesn't, I don't know. You're gonna have to suck it up and disable some settings to get to 60 frames per second. Also, there's probably some graphic settings that are really, really taxing on your CPU. Hardware Unboxed has been talking about this a lot recently. It's not always that you turn up settings and it hurts your GPU. It can limit CPU performance. In Battlefield 6, there's a few settings that I turn down so I can hit a consistent frame rate above 144. And it's for the CPU, just because again, of NVIDIA CPU overhead issue, I have to do that. Dark Helmet writes in, what are your favorite VR games? Resident Evil 7, and which is still my favorite Resident Evil, by the way. And Super Hot. I'm sorry, you can't beat Super Hot. Super Hot is so good, it's ridiculous. Dark Helmet writes in yet again and says 2 spaces after a period or 1. I will admit it, I am Joker brain. I am one of the people that likes to double space after a period. Let the angry comments roll in. All right, we got a tipped question here. Superior Bomb writes in and says, have you seen NVIDIA 591.44 drivers have enabled support for 32-bit PhysX for 9 games on the 50 series? Do you think they'll enable PhysX for more games or older games? Maybe. This just seems like the laziest way for them to do damage control. Like these are probably the games people keep pointing out that Blackwell can't run, and so they're going to support these games to quash that issue. My guess is they're basically done after that. But seeing that is better than nothing. WX2999 writes in and says, "Will we ever get ECC RAM as the normie standard?" Probably not. I mean, DDR5 isn't it already partially ECC compared to DDR4? I don't think so. AI Generalist Bill writes in and says, "Anything with RAM could be affected. RAM prices were falling until they weren't. So many manufacturers didn't stock up on RAM. Thank you, Sam Altman. You evil retracted." Yeah, anything with RAM could be affected. So, and there's other things affecting prices as well, like heat sinks are going up in price because the same things you would use, the same factories that would make a heat sink for a gaming PC might make it for a server company. So that's why that goes up as well. AI Generalist Bill writes in again, as a 35-plus-year-old unretired IT old fart. I'm almost 35. Don't call yourself old fart. What does that make me? A fart? An oldish fart? I love your show. Your insights are sharp, and you're a reputable, longtime follower. Diff ID. All right. Thank you for the support, my friend. So that is all of the Patreon questions, all of the tipped questions, and now he says I'm 71, bro. So okay, you're well over 35 then. All right. So that's basically it. I'll probably log off within 10 minutes, but I'll one more time. Any more questions? If you want to put in a tipped one now, if you're in the Moore's Law is Dead server in the after video thread, post questions now for free. If you're a patron, might answer those. Let's see. Any final questions, everybody? I've gone through quite a lot here, and I have to admit I am quite tired and getting hungry. What? Now he's asking him a question. Netflix Foreign says double spacing after a period is proper grammar. Where did the Joker face nonsense come from? Well, a lot of people just put one space. You don't actually have to do two spaces to be grammatically correct anymore. I was always taught two spaces. I think it looks better than one. Wired Rope says anything on Steam coming to PS5. Already answered that question earlier in the live stream. Just rewatch it. Any news on FSR4 coming to RDNA3? LCC Gaming asked that question. Yeah, it's coming. I will say, people do keep asking me this. Where's FSR4 and RDNA3? I've been leaking for months. It's going to be first half of next year. So stop asking me until we're to June next year because it is coming. They're talking about it. I've even seen some chats with devs and Sony where Sony says FSR4 will be coming as well as PSSR2 to PS5 Pro. PS5 Pro would do FSR4 the same way RDNA3 on desktop would. So there, if it's coming to PS5 Pro, it's going to be coming to other things. It's coming. But I never said it was going to come out right now. I keep saying FSR4 and RDNA3 is probably first half of next year. And it's probably linked to whenever it comes to PS5 Pro. No News says, what plans are retailers making for the DRAM shortages? Nothing. I mean, buying whatever they can short term and praying they don't go out of business. AZ and Homig writes in with a tip. What are you hearing about 5090 supply for early 26? Is it constrained? I've already put out a leak that the 5090 is effectively end of life. 5090. Here, I will post. And wasn't this last month's live stream? Okay. All right. I really wish they would at least let you click to the YouTube website, even if it's playing an ad, before having to skip an ad, before then you go to YouTube, to then try to see the video, to then see an ad again. Feel like we should be able to just do that once, YouTube, but replying to AZ and Homig. Like, here you go. This was a month ago. Was it a month? Was it 2 months ago? Sometimes YouTube doesn't tell you correctly. So this, yes, this was a month ago. Okay. There you go. I've already covered it. Again, that doesn't mean that they're stopping production of the 5090 like some websites that tried to attack me made up. But Yeah, I mean, they're winding down production. And by the way, this is the same thing they did with the 4090. A year after it came out, 4090s actually went up in price while other 4000 series went down. And that's because they supplied what they wanted to, which is to say they don't really want to supply them of the 90 series to gamers. Eventually, they then take most of those deals and sell it to AI. It's exactly what's going on with the 5090, same as what happened with the 4090. Um, AZN Homing says, I'm asking if the end of life rumors were still true. Why would they have changed, dude? Just because some crybaby on WCCF Tech writes a hit piece that ends up wrong? Come on, man. I'm already right. Go to Newegg right now. 5090 prices are up. I want to be clear, though. I did not say NVIDIA was going to end of life the 5090. What I said is effectively, meaning it's going to go above $3,000 and it's not really worth paying attention to. That's still happening. It actually already has happened on Newegg. So if you want to, that's why I said earlier in this live stream, if you want a 5090 and you find one for MSRP, get it now. You're screwed next year. But yeah, so no, I'm not changing what, no. It's the same thing. Duh, duh, duh. But all right. Let me check the Moore's Laws at Discord one more time. That seems to be all the questions. So, yeah, I think I'm going to end it there. I already am starting to have issues speaking, which means I'm exhausted. I need to eat dinner. But I hope you enjoyed that. What's this here? Let's see. Flantuin Unleashed says, I never get people that don't want to believe but show up. Oh, I don't. He says, I don't get why people don't want to believe it, but then ask for clarification. Either you believe them or you don't. Yeah, whatever. I don't know though. There's nothing wrong. I'm not mad at you for asking again. I'm just mad at the people that attack the channel. So, no. Feel free to ask again. Just if something would have changed, I probably would have said so, though. Right? That will get me clicks to do a new correction link. So, yeah. But it's kind of like when people ask me, "What do you know about?" Like, do you know the specs of the Nintendo Switch 3? If I did, do you think I wouldn't have leaked that by now? I mean, come on. But anyways, I'm rambling. Thank you for the questions, even the question about the 5090, which again, I did not say was end of life. I said it was effectively end of life, meaning prices are going to go up next year. We're already seeing it happen. And yeah, please like this video. Please share this video. Please get on your phone, pull up the live stream and hype the video. Give me hype points. Comment down below. And also, right now, before you sign off, check that you are subscribed to Moore's Law is Dead on YouTube. Please do that. About half of you are not. It does help the algorithm. It does help this get promoted. And consider joining Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon. Just so you know, the next guest is going to be a DRAM executive. Yes, someone near the top of these companies who's going to tell us what's going on with RAM shortages and how it compares to other shortages in history. If you join right now, I'm about to put out the request for questions for this guest. So even at the $1.28 tier, you can ask this guest questions. You get access to a bunch of exclusive Die Shrink episodes as well. So please check out the Patreon as well. Can I do this without our patrons? That is the most consistent way to show. That's the best way to show support and the most consistent way that this channel can have a stable income where we don't have to worry about sponsors as much. So please, please, please support Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon as well. And otherwise, if you made it this far, the end of the video, when I probably repeated myself 5 times and started rambling back and forth, God bless you. Thanks for watching this long.